Twitch, no! Oh boy. I'm sorry, everybody who's like watching this. And that's kind of like the way it's gonna be tonight. It's like a hot mess. Um, I'm starting late, so I do apologize. Anyway, and also I'm going to be, as I mentioned last night, I'm going to be reading 3 chapters tonight. Um, and I'm starting late, so that's fine. I have lots and lots of beverages. I mean, I have lots and lots and lots of beverages just so that I can go through to this all. Um, I don't know. I might need to take a break partway through. Not really sure. We'll see. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. For those of you who are just tuning in and have not seen the show before, you're coming in at a bad time. I'm almost halfway through the reading the stories. My name is Beth Wagner, and I am reading my father's manuscripts, and I'm also marking them up for editing. Uh, yeah, haven't read the story yet, so it's as new to you as it is to me. New to me as it is to you. There you go. You know what I mean. Anyway, normally do more of a preamble, but tonight, because I'm trying to get through all the chapters to see if it turns a bit and gives me pays off on some of the promises it's making. So I'm just going to try and burn through these chapters. If it's a bit much, then feel free to listen back to the broadcast after I'm done, because that might need to be a thing. All right. So without further ado, I present Chapter 8 of The Dance of 100,000 Steps. Yes. At Chapter 8. Well, actually, the insurrection wasn't quite over, but it seemed so at the time. My direct part in putting it down was over, though. Stanrad's. What? Sorry, some of these sentences are not making sense, which is why I'm saying this. This is the way it's been. Stanrad worked at picking up the pieces and starting over. Kontar Stanrad gave me the report. The wall of our barn was badly damaged, sir. And 3 of our horses were hurt so badly by musket fire that they had to be put down. 2 of the wagons they used in that barricade are too badly shot up and battered to be put back on the road. Might make use of the cart parts. Might still make use of the parts, though. He frowned. Don't doubt we'll be finding bits of this and that, been shot to all to hell and hot pitch from time to time for a while yet. I nodded. I'd hoped for better, but we'll make it through. We've made it through worse. We can survive long enough for people to start hiring hauling done. It's going to be a while yet before people settle down. Wait. Oh, good gravy. I nodded. I'd hope for better, but we'll make it through. We've made it through worse. If we can survive long enough for people to start hiring hauling done, it's going to be a while yet before people settle down. That's what I like about you, Kontar. Your unremitting cheerfulness. He frowned at me as though insulted and went out. The famous 4 took an assortment of cuts and gashes. Wildor Koratz had a broken leg, regarding which he said sheepishly, I saw the cobblestone coming my way. but I misjudged my dodge. Our creditors, in the, in the way common to creditors, were in general unwilling to make such allowance, if any, for the disruption caused by the riot and insurrection. After a disappointing lack of success in explaining the situation to one such, a little balding, chubby fellow with a poor disposition, to whom we owed a small bill for a wagon built and delivered some time ago, I stepped into the relatively fresh air of the street. Well, Olden, I remarked, I almost think it would be easier to find some criminal chief to give push to. Not such a good idea right now, sir. With soldiers reinforcing the constabulary and the whole city so jittery, you might start off more than you intended. Only joking, Olden, only joking. I know what the situation is like, and know it all too well. I did know. The situation was bad. Rumors abounded. People went about with tight faces, literally and figuratively looking over their shoulders. One rumor, which may have had some occasional truth to it, was that anyone, man or woman, who bore a wound that seemed as if it had been caused by a musket ball was being arrested and hanged. There were daily hangings. The king had decided that a heavy fist was required. My personal feeling was that the heavy fist had played a great part in causing the insurrection. But even if I had been asked, I would have known better than to say so. Many of the soldiers who were taken in arms against the king were shot out of hand. Some, who were given a chance to speak in exculpation, declared that they were only following the orders of their officers and ultimately the prince. Most of these were either discharged or demoted and scattered among the regiments on the far borders. Their officers were discharged and some few imprisoned. Officers were invariably of the nobility, mostly younger sons, and the conclusion was drawn that though they not spoken openly, the lords looked after their own. Several hangings were reported in Halstorden Watcher, in the Halstorden Watcher. Minor nobles who had been involved in the foul practice of blood magic. Not much further was said, but everyone understood that the earlier rumor was correct, that there had been a blood magic ring, and it had been sponsored by certain aristocrats who had been able to hinder by any official investigation. Rumors still said that there were certain other lords, unnamed, who had just been required to retire to their states rather than being properly punished. Matters appeared to be settling down. If continually fending off creditors and trying to collect their debts owed to us was described as settling down. Kontar Stanrad decided to stay on. It's business problems now, with everyone in the same state, not like it was, with one man out to grind me to dust, and me knowing there was nothing I could do about it. Then, about a month after the fight at the barricade, I heard a commotion in the street. Wildor, still limping, came in. Sir, it's King's men, asking for you. Most times, if a king sends for some commoner, the commoner is in trouble. But it didn't seem feasible to try and make any daring escapes, and particularly not until I knew for certain that escape was warranted. I didn't miss the fact, either, that they'd stopped outside to ask for me, not barged in with weapons ready. I stepped out. It was indeed men wearing the king's colors, a herald escorted by half-dozen hard-faced troopers. Jordan Weston, he asked. I am. He unrolled a small scroll and began to read from it. Jordan Wesson, you are requested and desired to present yourself to the king on the date of 11 Rs. And that's spelled A-R-Z. Rs. He looked up at me. You understand what I have read? I understand. He let the scroll roll itself back up, then handed it to me. I present you with this, then. It's the king's name, in the king's name. I took it. He turned his horse and rode away, his escort following him. Sherritt spoke first. Want to run for it, sir? I shook my head. If it was trouble, they'd have hauled me away with them. Coming to the king's attention is never a good notion. Not for a commoner, sir. I smiled at him. I think I'll have to risk it this once. You don't go to this king wearing any old thing. A new suit for the occasion was necessary. It was an expense I begrudged given the amount of debts Stanrads and I were in, but it wasn't something that could be avoided. In fact, Stanrads and I stood to benefit by it. My confidence was based on my strong belief that when the king summoned a commoner politely, it was to reward him. If I'd argued it, I might have made Kontar see that, but none of the others. Despite Sherritt's caution, it seemed likely that the king was going to present me with some sort of award, and whether or not it was a monetary award, it could be used to the advantage of the company. So, on the appropriate day, I arrived at the palace with my invitation in hand. A young officer escorted me to the throne room, giving me polite but terse instructions. Speak only when you're spoken to, address the king as highness, and if he asks you anything, you answer, but as briefly as possible. Understand? Yes. My training included a great deal of etiquette and with national variations. But it would take a greater fool than I could conceive of to bring that up here. The throne room was a high-ceilinged room, done in wood paneling, its walls covered with paintings, mostly of various kings and queens. There were also carefully placed busts and statues of famous rulers, those who had significantly expanded the territory of Aprush. Among these was Queen Astamar, known as the Warrior Queen, though I think that the tale of her wielding a musket in Battle of Liditmar was just that, a tale. Not that she wasn't incapable of doing unusual things, though. King Kaldark himself was an aged man, wearing impressive. Oh boy. King Kaldark himself was an aged man, wearing an impressive robes, brocade robes of state, which were embroidered with gold and trimmed with fur. The crown on his head was ornate, inlaid with jewels, and my impression was that it was too heavy for him. He wore a white beard, carefully trimmed, despite the clean shaven style of the times, and his left hand trembled slightly in his lap. Despite how the previous remarks may sound, I did not stand around gawking. I stood in the crowd, waiting quietly, paying close attention to what was going on. Part of my training, however, was in noticing things. In making awards, there were several methods King Kaldark might have handled matters. Each with its own advantages and disadvantages. He chose one that was sure to cause excitement, talk, and rancor, depending on where you stood. A herald called out, "Gerald Wesson, stand forth and approach." My escort nudged me, but I was already moving. I stepped forward and knelt before the king. When he spoke, there was a trace of a slur to his words, and I realized a rumor of his health were more than just idle talk. Jordan Wesson, for the services rendered to the kingdom of Afresh, I select and call you to stand among my nobility. I endow you with the title of the Mark of the King's Ward. In token of this, I present you this rod, a symbol of your right, under your sovereign, to administer justice among those under you. This was a seldom exercised right, little more than an honorary function. The king went on. I also present you with this purse, containing 400 silver mazers to keep you in fitting style, ready for such occasions as may require your attendance on me. If he'd required my attendance, that is, required me to be at hand if he wanted me, I'd have been hard put to run Stanrads at a distance. 400 mazers would have to go in part to maintaining my status as a lord, but at least some of it would go to getting us out of debt. Lord Jordan, you have my leave to go. I rose, bowed, and stepped back into the crowd. My escort escorted me out to ensure that I didn't do something that would offend protocol, and it was done. The people at Stanrad's were a little surprised to see me back. I explained that what reward had been and assured everyone that I sincerely hoped no one would take to addressing me as Lord. I had to describe the scene several times for some of the group, who, despite their fear of the aristocracy, had a great interest in the doings of the court. After I was able to get them back to their work, Stanrad asked, "What's the king up to here, Jerry? I think it's 40 years since the last commoner was made a noble." Well, the way I see it is, he's demonstrating appreciation of my fighting on his side, as it were. He wanted people to talk about it, especially among the commoners, hoping that people would think there's a possibility that they too might be ennobled if they served the king well. And maybe it was a dig at the nobility that I, a commoner, had served the king better than they, for all their noble ancestry. I see. Won't make you popular everywhere, Jerry. No. The people who are in the uprising, or even in support of it, will hate me. And the nobles won't like me at all either. Three days later, Kontar Stonrad himself reported a rumor. with some relish. They say Lord Hargill's still locked up, and likely be so for a while. The charge of sedition against him came just too close in time to the insurrection itself. To the king's watchers, the two must have been related somehow. They'll probably let him go after a while, but as far as I'm concerned, there's no one I'd like better to see locked up, even on a false charge. I couldn't help smiling. Yes, I think I'd agree with you there. While he's in jail, he's not likely to be making fresh trouble. You heard anything more about Crown Prince Konvuk? Well, he said, all those wild stories we've been hearing seem to have settled down to one. That he's abducted his brother, Prince Valad, and headed off to his own private stronghold, Walcheren, with anywhere from 2 to 10 regiments, along with some other noble supporters. King's army in close pursuit? He shook his head. King seems a little reluctant, and you can understand why. He doesn't want Valad killed because he needs someone to take the throne after he dies. He doesn't want Konvuk to have the chance. Well, that doesn't affect us much. Is business picking up, do you think? He frowned. Hard to say for certain. Some days it goes up, so I think we're on our way up. Other days we scarcely move a wheel. The invitation from Kalis came in a neatly written note on good quality paper, in an envelope to protect it from the very clean hands of the serving lad who delivered it, all dressed in lime green. Wait, all dressed in lime green. Nope. In lime green, with a jacket, very white shirt, and tan breeches. Sorry, wait, there we go. All dressed in a lime green jacket, very white shirt, and tan breeches. I noticed that he looked at me wide-eyed while waiting for an answer. I suppose I was the great hero who had stood off half the insurrectionists single-handed. The note itself was brief. The Lady Kalis in Fio invites Lord Jordan Wesson to dinner on the 11th day of Terrell. Please reply through the bearer. Will there be any reply, sir? Yes, tell the Lady Kalis I will be happy to attend. I tossed him a minim, which he caught, bowed, gave a cheerful grin, and was off. It wasn't an assignation, though the raucous crew at Sanrad saw it differently. They were spinning a long and somewhat off-color tale of my pulling up at Kalis's door late one night in a Stanrad's wagon, running off with her. Each one, it seemed, had his bit to add to the story. Even my threats to administer justice to those under me didn't have much effect there. Contra Stanrad had to step in to demand. You lot got nothing to do but stand around blathering? Hell and hot pitch. I'll find something for you to do. No, Kalis was not the sort for assignation. Aside from which, using a serving lad to deliver the note would just assure that the word got all through the servants' quarters, and thence to know who, where. More likely, this had something to do with the trip from Freyant, in specific, the kinds of abilities I'd shown. I could, of course, say no. I was attempting to run a business here, though a business that had sufficient troubles already. Not that I thought Kalis Might be vindictive if I turned her down, but at least if I listened to her, her positive attitude could be valuable. She was good looking as well. Now, where did that come from? Come on, Jerry. A jumped up commoner doesn't have a hope with it. The aristocratic lady from a family that spans the borders of at least two countries. Jarrett Thinstey was still hanging around. Not exactly being under Stanner's authority, he hadn't scattered like the rest of them. What now? I'm invited to dinner, and I've accepted. Yes, Lady Kalis. And you said there was nothing between the two of you. It's business, I suspect. I suddenly realized I hadn't been as careful with my talks as I ought to have been. Business? She wants something hauled? This sounds more and more interesting. Now, what could she want hauled, do you suppose? I gave him a look. He suddenly went quiet. Right, business. And I've got things to do right now. He hurried away. I was still amazed at myself for letting myself be so careless. And I went from there to being very careful. The workers got the brunt of it, of course. The little lapses that might otherwise have gotten a bare mention narrated a more vigorous reaction. It wasn't until the next day that I got myself properly balanced. Old Holton would not have been pleased. I arrived at Kalis's house, or rather, her uncle's house, on the evening of the 11th of Terrell. I was not as finely dressed as I had been for my appearance at the palace, but I had managed to find a suitable outfit for the occasion. The large butler with semi-military bearing announced my presence. I may have been imagining the slight tone of disapproval in his voice as he spoke. Lord Jared Wesson, Mark of the King's Ward. I felt a little pretentious hearing the title attached to myself. Kalis I knew, Bralham I knew, and was introduced to her uncle, Valt Cad Tarnhand, as well as a shy little girl in a brown dress, Sarvi Cad Hestordan, Bralham's fiancée. Mealtime discussion avoided the talk of the uprising itself, but did touch on how well the city was recovering from the trouble. I did not express any drastic opinions myself, though I was led to understand that attitudes among the nobility ranged from the fierce, shoot one in 10 every time there's trouble, to the sentimental, we have to do more for the common people. The general opinion of this particular household was along the lines of something has to be done for those poor, but the total destruction of society is not a sensible method. Uncle Valt did press me a bit on my opinions on these matters, and even after I murmured, finally Kalis spoke up. Uncle, we didn't invite Jordan here tonight to question him on his politics. Then to me, you must forgive Uncle Jordan. He is very involved in affairs of state and wants to be sure everyone agrees with him. Nothing to forgive, I assured her. I was finding myself always aware of Kalis's presence and having to keep myself centered almost by main force. It wasn't anything she was doing, just my reaction to her. We hadn't yet come to discuss the reason for the evening's invitation, and I wanted to be in firm control of myself, emotions included, when that time came. So the talk drifted into business and how the business of the city was recovering after the late troubles. Even here, I tried not to express very definite opinions. I've been too much tied to the rebuilding of my own business to really pay much attention. Uncle Valt, in his gentle and unassuming manner, said, I'd have thought that the hauling business and its ups and downs depended heavily on the state of business in the rest of the city. But how is your business going then? It requires constant attention. We'd lost some creditors, wiped out business, family, and all in the blood magic riots and the insurrection that followed. But we also lost some long term customers in the same way as well. Business is still slow, and much of my time is spent going around talking to people, anyone, who might at any time in the future need something hauled somewhere. What does being a lord help in that regard? I shrugged. It helps and it hinders. For some, the title is important, and for some, my background as a commoner and foreigner outweighs the title. And in some quarters, our wagons can count on having a stone or brick thrown from an alley here or there. People who are in the insurrection